There has never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. Whether you're ready to start, restart, or re-energize your vegan or plant-based practice, this podcast is for you. I'm Michele Olander, life coach, vegan, ADHD matriarch, travel lover, and smoothie loather. And I know that it's the details that get in the way of your vegan journey. But I like to believe that the obstacle is always the way. So every week we meet here where I translate the tools of life coaching and Stoic philosophy. I bring you actionable tips, some laughs, interesting guests, and vegan ideas for everyone at any age. All to help you veg your best. Episode 253, Plant-Based Cooking as an Act of Personal Liberation. My interview with Chef Day Radley from the Vegan Chef School. Hi, my Vedge Your bestie, it's Michele. Are we in the middle of summer? I guess it's only the beginning of summer, but because of the heat in most of the United States, I think also in Europe, it feels like we're in the middle of summer right now. And today's an interview with a guest. I think she was telling me it was very hot in London when I spoke with her for this interview a couple weeks ago. And if you've ever told yourself, I'd love to learn how to cook plant-based, but I've left it too late. Or maybe you're in a situation where you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm way too busy to start something new right now. I think this episode is especially for you. My guest is Chef Day Radley, founder of the Vegan Chef School in the United Kingdom. And if there's one thing Chef Day makes clear, it's that it's not too late. In fact, she says midlife might just be the perfect time to step into a new chapter, whether that means learning to cook, changing your career, or simply aligning your choices a little more closely with your personal values. You're going to hear today how Day Radley became vegan thanks to a tiny pink flyer at a protest, how she started her school just before the pandemic and how it has evolved since then, and how she's now training a new generation of plant-based chefs, many of whom themselves are reinventing themselves in midlife. So whether you're plant curious, career curious, or just wondering how food could be a form of personal liberation, this one's for you. Day Radley of the Vegan Chef School, welcome to Veg Your Best.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on.
It's a delight, an absolute delight. You know, I learned about you through the Vegan Business Tribe.
Yeah.
And so I've met a lot of nice people through that group, and I think they're kind of reformulating what's going on over there. But it's a kind of a networking, web-based group of vegans and plant-based professionals and individuals, and it's so nice to get to see you on my Zoom screen face to face.
Yeah, and just to say, with the business tribe, we actually got to meet in London the other day. So, it was amazing. And people came from all over the country to come to that meeting, and it just kind of like reiterated that feeling that I have about, being around a bunch of people who are very like-minded and coming together, and that community aspect that is so important to this movement.
It is true, because many of us have the experience. I don't know about you, but some of us, like my guest this past week on the podcast, she's the only vegan in her family or immediate friend group. I'm the only vegan in my family. A lot of us have our own, we're on our own in certain ways. And so it's lovely to have the support of people and the inspiration of people doing things in a plant-based or vegan direction around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's just a very kind of, you can be very natural and be very easy to be around like other people who have like a very similar mindset to you. And you don't have to kind of explain anything. You don't have to, just feels like so much easier. And because so many of us have businesses now, so it's really great to connect with each other because we have our own challenges working in, vegan businesses or, kind of like ethical businesses, especially as like most of us are, solo entrepreneurs as well.
Exactly, exactly. This is why I love to have some people from that space on my podcast. I think it's great for my listeners to get to know all of you, and it's just nice for me also to get to know you in a different way and ask you the questions that I'm interested in asking. And I was just telling you, I was making sure that I had your quote correct. I told you before we started rolling here. You have a quote that just jumped out at me. Cooking isn't a chore, it's a tool for personal liberation. And I'm wondering
Mhm.
if you could tell me a little bit about what that means to you.
Gosh, well, there are quite a few different parts to that. So, kind of liberation, as in kind of you are choosing what to eat, you're choosing what to cook. So you are choosing, whether to be a party to animal suffering or not, or to how we treat the planet, but also in how you treat yourself. So what food are you going to put into yourself, 3 times a day? How well are you going to look after yourself? So, you have so much agency over what you eat, over what you choose to cook, and it says a lot about you. And I think that a lot of people go along in life thinking that, they eat what they eat because that's just how they've always eaten. But actually, like it's such a choice that you can make, and it has so much of an impact on the rest of the planet and also your own body. So I think, it's the kind of like starting point of, being able to take control as well of, your choices and your impact.
I so agree with you on that. And it's something that was not obvious to me until I had been vegan for a while. And as many people know, I didn't become vegan until my 50s, about 10 years ago. And I totally agree. It was the empowerment of it, the way it made me slow down and think about the consequences of who I am and what I can ask for and what's still available to me as a human being that has some miles on the machine, So because you start to think, oh well, that's just how it is, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, kind of disconnecting from that. And, when I was 17, I was very fortunate to have been taken to a protest against the moving veal calves abroad. So it was a time when there were protests around the ports in the UK. And because of the protests there, they had to they had to move these calves in a different way. So they were at the local airport to me. And so I grew up in the middle of England, completely landlocked, and these poor calves were being, shipped out from there or flew out from there. And so I went along, and I was a student at the time, and one of my fellow students like told me to come along, and I think I was vegetarian at the time. I'd only been vegetarian for 6 months, and I went to the protest, and this little old lady who was about like 4 foot tall, with like a woolly hat. She came over to me and she gave me this flyer, this pink flyer. And she was just like, not your idea of a protester for a start, because, the media portrays a protester in a certain way. And she gave me this flyer and it detailed the life of a dairy cow, and it showed a picture that I will always remember of this dairy cow with a massive udder that reached down to the ground because it was so big. And so on it, it said, what would happen to the male calf. And I just had no idea up until that point. Absolutely no idea. But I think like 17 is a really interesting age because you're deciding what type of adult you want to be. So I think it was just really great timing because at that point I just thought, I don't want to be a party to this. And so just overnight I stopped eating milk and eggs, and I didn't know how to cook at all. And then I had to learn how to cook.
The strategies and the skills come after you've got the why very often. Well, no, can you just briefly tell me about what the moving calves meant? So these were UK calves.
Yeah.
that were then being moved alive or after slaughtering?
So alive. So this is very hypocritical of the UK. So you're not allowed to create veal
Hmm.
or, kind of like, the veal that means that the calf has a lot of suffering to go through, the white veal. You were not allowed to make that in the UK. So these calves were taken to mainland Europe, made into veal there, and then shipped back to the UK and sold as veal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's incredibly, incredibly hypocritical. Yeah, so I went to those protests, and that was like a really, very well known, well publicized protest at the time. So people did get to know about it quite a lot. So I think, white veal isn't common in the UK anymore. So I don't think that process necessarily happens anymore. But
Which
of course,
part? Which part? The buying it back or the sending it off?
yeah, yeah, I think buying it back doesn't really happen. You do get pink veal in the UK, in the same way that you get lamb, unfortunately. But it was my kind of entry into veganism and, thinking that, I was vegetarian and I was doing everything I could, and that was enough, and then you find out all of this and yeah, it just like completely opened my eyes and it just made me realize as well, that I can decide whether to be complicit in something or not
Yeah.
through what I choose to eat, through what I choose to buy.
Yeah. I mean, that's an extremely powerful realization at any time in your life. And I think there are certain times in your life where you're more open. I think for sure, late adolescence is a time when you're trying on different personas and seeing if you've got the support or the skills or the personality to go through with some of these. And then I think also, and then later on in life, there are these transition times when people are, you move away from a certain way of living. Maybe their children move out or they retire or there's some sort of a happy or unhappy change in life, and people are open to re-looking at the things that they've expected as just normal that no longer seem normal. And I always say coming to this later in life has made me also much more thoughtful about everything, not just my food choices or animal cruelty or sustainability. So everything you think, well, what else am I not seeing because I've just done it for so many years.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it's a bit of a Pandora's box in that
Not
way.
everybody likes that. No, so tell me, so you run the Vegan Chef School, which is
Mhm.
at veganchefschool.com. It's a beautiful website. Absolutely love it. And I'm guessing you have a certain component of student there who is also changing things up. Probably some of the people you work with have not cooked in a vegan or plant-based way previously.
Well, most of my students who are on the vegan chef diploma, and that's like the main course that I run, most of those people, they are vegans,
Mm.
they're passionate home cooks, and they've already got a career, but they're not very happy with it, and they want to move into working in vegan food, preferably on a full-time basis. So they are people who are used to, certain ingredients, and I always look for people who are foodies because they have to come to it with a certain level of knowledge, because it is quite an intense course. But yeah, they will have that knowledge already. I don't tend to get people who are, already chefs and they want to learn how to do vegan cooking. I have worked with some people like that on a kind of consultancy basis, on a kind of like one-to-one basis. But with the course, it's mainly people, and it's mainly people who are in their 30s, I would say, who, they've got their career and they got to a certain point and they're, they're just not happy because they're doing something that doesn't really align with their beliefs. And they really want to transition into something where they're trying to make the world into a better place in the way that they think it needs to be a better place. So, and also they love working with foods, they love being creative. I have a lot of students who want to go into recipe developing, who want to do food photography, who want to be private chefs. And I was a private chef for a long time, so I can help them with like the next step on their career.
Mm. I know somebody else who's a private chef, and I think there's an intersection there is when, as a private chef, you have to be uh, responsive to the employer's food decisions. So do you position yourself as a vegan private chef, or do most of your students try to position themselves in that way, or do they just try to like stealth get in there as a private chef and then keep pushing the vegan options?
I think most of my students really want to focus on vegan food.
Hmm.
Um, and that is becoming more and more popular, more and more possible, sorry, for them. Um, and within the private chef sector, you are getting more and more clients who want somebody who can really focus on just the vegan side of things. Now, you may have clients who want you to do, a bit of non-vegan food for the kids or, other people in the household, whatever. Um, but sometimes you do find clients who just want vegan food solely, and so really that's a decision that the students need to make as they go into the field of like what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. But I would say definitely in the private chef sector there are more and more and more jobs all the time, because here in the UK, 20 years ago it used to be just rich people who would have a cleaner, and now quite a lot of people have a cleaner, and it's going the same way with private chef work. So you might not necessarily be working for somebody 5 days a week, full-time hours, but you might be going in there to do things like fridge fillers for them. So going in there to prep, a whole week's worth of food that you then go and stick in the fridge, and then they come and reheat them. So you don't need to be a billionaire to be able to afford to get somebody to do that now. So that's the kind of jobs that they might be looking at.
And is that the sort of thing that they learn? So I would like you to tell me a little bit about what the kind of curriculum is for that program.
So I really try to train the students to become creative chefs. So there's a real focus on the theory of, how do you create a dish? How do you create a recipe that has all the different like five flavors and texture and visual appeal? And so of course I do teach them some recipes, to teach them different techniques, but the main focus is on their recipe development project. So they do 3 recipe development projects, and usually it's a brief that is quite tight, because it's the type of brief that a professional chef would get. So I want them to have that real world experience. And usually that brief, we do it with an organization. So like we've done it with the Vegan Society before, Riverford Organics, which is a lovely kind of organic farm down in Devon. And so they do like meal kit things, that get delivered to people. And so the students had a brief where they had to create a recipe for the meal kit. And then the one that they thought was best was the one that won, and that actually got put into production.
Mm.
So, it's kind of giving them those real world experiences, so that then they can really like flex that creative muscle, and get used to what it's really like to be a chef. And then also at the end of it, they've got that thing to put on their CV as well, when they're taking their first step into a career in chefing. And they also do internships as well. So they can do them for, a couple of weeks or longer, however, because it kind of has to fit in with their life. These are people who often they've got full-time jobs. They might have kids. They might have other like care responsibilities, So it's got to kind of fit into their lives, because they're at this point where you can't just tell them like, oh, just quit your full-time job, and you've got a mortgage and you've got kids to feed and stuff like that. So it's trying to find a way to give them these like stepping stones to get to the next part if that's what they want to do, because there might be some students who come on the course and they're like, yeah, that was a lot of fun. But actually, I'm quite happy just doing dinner parties for my friends because actually doing it as a career, like, oh, I thought it was a good idea, but it's not quite for me. And they might do it just to like, figure that out for them. But I would say about like 80% of my students want to go on to being professional chefs after they finish the course. And the majority of them do that. So, I've had students who've gone to work in professional restaurants. I've had students who've gone to work in Gautier, which is like a haute cuisine restaurant in London. A lot of students have opened their own businesses as well. So that might be kind of like food trucks, catering, private chef work, that type of thing. So they, a majority of them like do go on to do amazing things in vegan food, and that's kind of, I think, really what I wanted. It was kind of like a legacy project in a way. It's like I struggled for so many years to learn all of this stuff. There were no training courses when I started out as a chef. And it took me such a long time and such a lot of work. So I wanted to kind of pass all that on to other people and then let them, go out into the world and do amazing things with the vegan food that they wanted to create.
So that's amazing because I think of creativity I think creativity works so much better when you've got, as you say, a brief, when you've got, it has to fit into something that somebody else needs or uses or is looking for. Creativity with when you can just use any color and any material or any, then it's like, okay. But I think our juices really start getting excited when there are these constraints of some sort. So that's wonderful. And I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking about the people who have cooked for me, both in vegan places or people who are doing nice vegan options for me in more traditional restaurants. And I'm wondering, what do you see missing in a lot of vegan options, whether they're in a vegan restaurant or in a traditional restaurant? As someone who's always just living in this world, there must be things that you're thinking, oh, why did they do it that way? Or why did they not include this?
Um, well, I think we have amazing options now. Amazing options. And I see a lot of great food at the more independent restaurants.
Mm.
In the chain restaurants, I think it's still fairly poor. And I think that like we've got a pizza chain restaurant here that has a pizza with butternut squash on it. And I love butternut squash, but I wouldn't put it on a pizza. And it's like you don't need to do something that's really kind of like left field for the vegans, like we'd be really happy with just making, whatever is your most popular non-vegan pizza and make it vegan. And that isn't that difficult these days. So it's that kind of like randomness I find, and also that a lot of those restaurants don't seem to change the options for vegans. So they might change the other parts of the menu, but ours seem to stay the same all the time. And some of the dishes are really nice, but it just gets quite boring after a while. And there are some great independent restaurants doing some really amazing things. I mean, it would be lovely to see more of the fine dining restaurants here, and I think like the two that we have in London are doing really well. Gautier is very successful. Plates, has got a Michelin star now, but never seems to be open when I try to book. So
That happened to me too. But Gautier, yes, I've gotten in both to the one at Brown's Hotel and the more sushi oriented one, or I don't know if they call themselves sushi oriented, but they have
yeah,
their take on a sushi restaurant. And then the other one it's in Soho, right? Gautier
yeah,
Soho.
yeah.
Yeah, I would love him to be on the podcast. I would love to hear his story. I learned about him through Henry Mance, wrote a wonderful book. He's a writer for the Financial Times, and he wrote a beautiful book about. I'm going to mess up the title, but it's like how to love animals in a human-shaped world, and he did a stage, I believe, at Gautier, one of his things that he did to get to know this world of why people are making different choices about
Mm.
animals and how to live without hurting them. So, because it's funny you say that the butternut squash on pizza because probably delicious, probably, but it kind of feeds that narrative that vegans just eat the craziest stuff for the rest of the world.
Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely. And like I used to work for a half Palestinian, half Italian family, and food tradition was so important to them. So I'd be remaking either their grandmother's recipes, but making them vegan, making them healthier, etc., etc. And I think in the UK we have a very different relationship with food. Like we do have food that our grandmothers made. We do have things that are that kind of traditional food. But we don't have as much of a variety as other countries that are close to us, like France or Italy. And we don't have as much of a connection to those foods either. So in a way, that can be like a bad thing, that we don't have that. We don't have like these like great recipes, that are handed down and people that are popular. But on the other hand, it's actually been a really, really great thing because there's loads of creativity in British food because you don't have that tie. I've traveled to many different countries where people say, well, with that recipe, you can't change it because if you change that one thing in it, it isn't that recipe, you know.
Yes.
Whereas in the UK, it's just like, no, it's free for all. Like we don't worry about that. You can be creative, and I think that's a great thing. And maybe that's why veganism has really like taken hold here, and we've got some great vegan restaurants because of that. Because we're not worried about upsetting our grandmother by changing that recipe.
That's fascinating. I never ever thought of that. My husband and I got engaged in London, and my dad grew up in London, and we're in the UK in some part of the UK every year, maybe sometimes twice. And I never ever thought about it that way because they are. I mean, it is just the easiest place for vegans to travel because you don't have nobody just stares at you with the crickets going in the background when you ask for what the options are. They'll just say, "Oh yeah." They'll figure something out. It might not be great, but they are not shocked or weirded out or so that is why it's just such a relaxing place to travel, isn't it? But I never thought about the idea of the food kind of because our family culture is Polish. And yeah, for sure, if you change certain things, a lot of Polish grandmothers will look at you. Now I'm a Polish grandmother, but a lot of Polish grandmothers will say, "Well, that's not right.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
do
no,
that."
exactly. Exactly. So three of my grandparents were Polish. Yeah, and one English kind of Welsh. So so yeah.
So you're even more Polish than I am. You've got three Polish grandparents. I only had two. That's interesting. Yeah, that's so it is very interesting. And yes, when we travel, I find we travel in Italy. Italians are very comfortable with vegetables, but they are also prickly about you, but you wouldn't call it the name of the dish because you're not making it the same way, or you're not using the cheese that's in it. So you can't use that name. So they're very prickly about some of that. It's part of why I think older vegans can show so much leadership in the world by being open and by supporting the younger people who are interested in looking at food systems and food specifics differently because we have in some ways a bad rap of being very reactionary and stuck in the mud and no, but now what will I cook for you if you don't so it's great if we can be the ones that are actually leading the way to rethink
Oh
food.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And having that flexibility and openness.
So tell me how your school works and the history of it. Like, so what was the first iteration of Vegan Chef School?
So I opened the Vegan Chef School in 2019
Oh,
and
tough year.
yeah, well, we had a great year.
Okay.
2019 was actually fine. And it was in person in London, and we got a lot of attention because it was the first thing of its kind, and people were crying out for vegan chefs at that time. Like restaurants just didn't know where to find them. So that was a great year. And then it was, yeah, so when the pandemic hit, the beginning of the next year in 2020,
Mhm.
where I had to stop doing everything in person, and I launched courses online. So everything had to go online. So I started with, first of all, the chef course going online. And during that time, I was doing Facebook Live cook-alongs every day, like
Mhm.
every single day, which was a bit crazy. But to be honest, I think it kind of kept me sane during all of that, and built up like a really, really, really lovely community of people who they would go and get the ingredients and they would cook along with me if they could, or some people would just watch the video and make comments and ask questions and that type of thing. And so because of them, I created a cooking course for beginners, because they really wanted something that was kind of like the entry level course. And then I developed a nutrition course but specifically for chefs. Because as a vegan chef, you will get people who are asking you nutrition questions, even though you're not a nutritionist. I think even as a vegan, you get that as well.
Yes.
Everybody expects you to know about nutrition. But as a chef, it's really good for you to have some level of knowledge. So you don't need to go out there and do like a full, nutritionist course or a degree or anything like that. But you need to know, how do I make these dishes have more protein or have less oil, or, whatever it is. And also coming up with menus for specific clients. So the nutrition course goes into that. And then the last course I created was the food photography course for chefs, because they don't need to know how to be food photographers, but they need enough knowledge to be able to publicize their food, because it's all about, it's all about the photo now, and that's the way that they promote themselves.
Yeah, because we're going to want to see it. We'd love to see your face, but then mostly we want to see the food.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And so, there are some really lovely dishes out there that taste amazing, but they don't look great on Instagram, so nobody wants to make them. So yeah, so we teach them food photography as well, and a lot of these things are things that the students will be learning in the in-person course in September as well. So they'll have a day learning about food photography, they'll have a day learning about nutrition, but then the rest of the time it's kind of, hands on deck, chopping and sautéing and yeah, cooking.
I'm imagining that a good portion of food photography is remembering some color on your plate because it can just look awfully beige sometimes. If we're eating the way I eat, it can look very, very beige. The mushrooms and the farro and the onions when they're cooked, everything can kind of start looking very. And my personal trick is I have daikon vegan kimchi in the fridge, which is bright, bright red. And it always makes the plate look prettier. So just to have that. But obviously, people use chopped greens and all sorts of things. But it's so interesting that we need to help. My guest this past week was talking. She goes, "I want to seduce people into veganism." So we do. We want them to be like not just making the emotional connection with it, but really thinking, "Oh, that's really going to be delightful way for me to live."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's why veganism took off at the time that it did, because you weren't just telling people why they should do something, you were telling them, well, if you do it, this is how amazing it's going to be. This is the amazing food that you're going to be able to eat. And it's not difficult either. So you were showing them the why and you were showing them the how at the same time.
And in terms of the nutrition, I find that even um, some vegan chefs, but also even people who are being very thoughtful in traditional restaurants, they will make something that's vegan, but it doesn't have anything satisfying in terms of they'll leave out beans or something that does provide that kind of protein or that extra level of satiety from the dish. And so you'll get the pasta with some vegetables in it, which is great and it's good and it's not it's fine, but that extra level of something in it to stick with you for a full
Mhm.
meal is so important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, making people feel full up. I mean, that's the thing, like quite often when people have become vegan for health reasons, they'll really struggle with that side of it because they want something, they're used to that feeling of full upness. If they were particularly like heavy meat eaters before, to them that feels normal, like having that almost kind of bloated feeling, but they'll want something that is quite meaty, like mushrooms and aubergine. But yeah, that kind of feeling of full upness is very important to some people. If they don't have that, they don't feel like they've eaten properly.
Mm, And the other thing in terms of the nutrition is I know that especially a lot of people who are kind of socialized as women or as very health conscious, particularly athletes, they're used to having that chicken breast and then brown rice or broccoli. So they're used to eating a kind of a small, controlled portion. And I found personally that I had to eat much more volume of food
Yeah.
when I was moving in a vegan direction. I really had because otherwise I was hungry, and that's what so many people say. Oh, I was hungry. I couldn't stick with it because I mean, you're like, well, you have to eat. You actually
Yeah.
have to eat a little more food. It's actually a
Yeah.
kind of a good problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And you're consuming like so many more vitamins and minerals. So, I mean, that's one of the things that kind of like really worries me about Ozempic is that, you've got all these people who are not going to be eating very much food. It's like, well, where are you going to get your vitamins and minerals from? Like your body needs them to survive. And I think that's the thing, like we demonize food in that way. Like I refuse to talk to people about calories. Like I don't think that's a good way for us to understand food at all. That's the way that we used to understand food when we had no other way of understanding it. It's not a great way to measure food, educating people about macronutrients, about what are good fats, what are good carbohydrates, is really the best way to go because then you can really fully understand what choices you're making, what foods you're eating. Demonizing calories, well, calories is also energy. That's what like gives you fuel for the day, so, and I think like our food systems and the way that we talk about food is so harmful to us, that lack of knowledge and also that kind of misdirection. And I think a lot of the food companies are really good at that misdirection. So, you'll see like so many processed like UPF products that say that they're protein this or fiber that, but they're just full of rubbish.
Mm, yes, and vegan companies can make that same mistake at times, I think, too. We want to make sure that we're erring on the side of real foods.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that about calories because my understanding, and I'm not a food historian, but my understanding about calories is it super important. And it was, as you say, it was our initial way of understanding nutrition in this way because people weren't getting enough. Human beings in the military, human beings in factories, human beings, and they needed to be prisons. They weren't getting enough food, and so food scientists were trying to figure out what did human beings need when we weren't getting enough. Now, this is a very different problem in our day.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Definitely. And, it's very similar to the whole like protein myth, people thinking that we need masses and masses of protein and people drinking protein shakes all the time. And you don't need that much protein. I think like the research study that myth was based on was how do you bring people who have been malnourished? What is the best way to help them to put on weight to become healthy again? And it's to give them high amounts of protein. But that's not the majority of us.
Yeah.
Not like that. So, um, yeah, and I think, the best way for you to kind of break free of that is to educate yourself. from reliable sources, and there are some great reliable sources on the internet, like Dr. Michael Greger. I think, it's amazing like what he does and like how he speaks about food as well. Um, if you don't want to read it, you can watch his videos and learn so much because he's always referring to proper research studies to back up what he's saying. There are so many voices on the internet now. It's really important to find trusted sources, but it is all there.
Right. He shows you his work.
Mm.
He lists them so you can say that doesn't sound at all right to me. I'm going to look at that. So he's not hiding behind just a point of view or a persona
Yeah.
or a beautiful plate of food or a great hairstyle.
Yeah.
So tell us how my listeners are listening. They're thinking vegan chef school. That sounds interesting. How should I find out more about it?
So the first place to look is my website. So that's the veganchefschool.com. I've got loads of recipes on there as well. So if people, just want to go and grab a recipe, they've got lots of Halloween recipes and Christmas recipes from some of my students as well.
Mm.
But then you can have a look at the courses, see if it's anything that you want to do. You can sign up to the newsletter. And then with the newsletter, you get access to one of the courses for free, my healthy breakfasts course, because I think that's a great way for everybody to start the day, is the healthy breakfasts. And then you can just try one out. You can do it for free.
And you have a new cohort going through for the fall. Is that how you run your classes?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll be starting in September in London at a new venue that is completely vegan, which is amazing. So the course will run from September through to December. So it runs over 12 Sundays so that people can fit it in with their full-time jobs. And then we'll be running another one in January.
And that's fully in person, that
Yes.
particular thing. And do you still do online classes?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we've got the vegan chef diploma that you can take online, the vegan cooking diploma, the vegan nutrition diploma, and the food photography for chefs diploma.
So that's all available at veganchefschool.com. And Day Radley, I was making sure that I said your name correctly. I'll tell my listeners why in the beginning and the end when I read it. But Day Radley, it was such a joy to have you here. I think what you're doing is just marvelous, and I'm sure you want to remind our listeners that it's important for them to patronize vegan restaurants and businesses. They all need a little bit of extra love. They need somebody to buy a gift certificate from their company or a gift card. They need a little bit of some sharing them on social media. What's a good way for us to remember to help new vegan ventures?
I think, connecting with them on social media, supporting them that way is really good because when you're starting out, that can really make a world of difference. Just having some people supporting you on social media, resharing your stuff, making nice comments, that type of thing. But if you are looking for gifts for people, then looking at local vegan businesses or online vegan businesses for them because it does mean so much to them. And quite often those, they're companies that are doing things in a very sustainable way as well. They're trying to be as sustainable as they can be. So supporting them in that way is also a good idea.
Yeah, because all businesses need your help right now. It's a tough time for many businesses, but it's super. The vegan businesses really could use a little extra love.
Absolutely.
Chef Day Radley, thank you so much for joining us on Vedge Your Best.
Thank you so much.
So what did you think of Day Radley? Chef Day is just the kind of person I think most of us wish we'd met about 10 years ago. But I like to think it's always right on time when we learn about somebody's new business or new personality or whatever's going on with them. I think they come into our lives just at the right time. And what really struck me today was how Day talked about cooking not just as a life skill, but as a kind of quiet revolution. Choosing what we eat, what we cook, how we show up in the kitchen, it's all evidence of the agency we do have, and it's all activism. And if you're curious about her programs, or you just want to grab some delicious recipes that are super tested, head over to theveganchefschool.com. You can sign up for her newsletter. I think that's probably one of the better ways to keep her on your radar. And you can get access to her free course, Healthy Breakfast course, the Healthy Breakfast course, free if you sign up for her newsletter. And if something Day said today sparked a thought or an idea or a decision that you've been putting off, I'm going to hope that you'll share this episode or drop me a note. I would love to hear what you're cooking up. And in the meantime, regardless of the temperature, it's a good time to veg your best. Vedge Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Vedge Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.